once you have it, it's like there's no way you give it up. It's really hard work and takes up a lot of my time.
It's about being confident in knowing that you are enough and you don't necessarily have to have somebody else that completes everything in your life.
For me, being poly is about maintaining my freedom as an individual. I could never be with a man that was like, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't go out, you can't see these people, you can't feel this way about somebody else. I think that's a whole bunch of bullshit.
There's certain people you get along with better than others. There's certain people you can live with better than others. You can love more than one person for different reasons, but not necessarily be able to be with that person in relationships.
I have 3 partners right now. 2 of them live in Vancouver. My other partner is Sam. She lives in Wisconsin. She and I met on a fan forum for a band we both liked in 2008. So we've known each other for a really long time. I was in a car accident a couple months ago, and since then I've gotten much closer to Phoenix because he's done a lot for me. He's been around, he's been driving me to appointments. He basically took care of me for weeks after my accident. And with all of this time that I've spent with him, right now we're sort of at the point in a relationship where I would be terrified about how I feel. Because it is so strong and so all-encompassing. He's the partner with whom we have decided to have a child.
I met Alistair at work. I was a waitress, and it was incredibly cliche. I was annoyed at his drink order. He had to have absolutely no fruit touching his glass, so I thought he was a bit of a pompous ass.
We happened to be making paper napkin roses that our friend was teaching us how to do. It was the very first time I'd ever made one. And we made probably about 50 of them that night, and I ended up giving one to Amanda after she had heard these crazy stories about my demanding drink orders. And at the end of the night I tipped her with scratch and win tickets, which I thought would probably have her remember me, and left her with a phone number. And then after that I didn't hear from her in a while.
And it was all around the holidays, and New Year's Eve came around, and for some reason when they had the big countdown I felt compelled to call him. And I called him and I left a message that was probably extremely inaudible because I was fairly intoxicated. It was really loud where I was, and it went straight to voicemail.
We went out to where she worked to find her and asked for her number again and her name, because I couldn't really remember her name.
That he wants to see other people, but he wants to see me too. And I'd never heard of that before, and I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, I really like you and everything, but I want to, you know, I've always had this part of me or whatever, right, that needs to be open about what I do and what I see, and I don't want that restricted.
I had a general feeling as to what I didn't want from a relationship. I hadn't really explored a lot as to exactly what the community, lifestyle community, was all about. And the relationship I was in prior to Amanda was kind of a failure at that attempt. But I knew moving forward it was not, I didn't want to go back into the regular monogamous style relationship.
We decided to try, and we moved in together, and then we didn't know how to really progress after that. He couldn't deal with my emotions, and he didn't want to deal with my emotions, so instead he just lied to me and was who he was, but I didn't know about it. And finally he didn't want to live like that anymore, so we ended up splitting for about 6 months, and we stopped all contact.
So our first attempt was 6 months, and then a big chunk break in the middle, and then we got back together again. And
he had given up on the idea that he would have any sort of like long-term love, that he would always be this floating kind of guy or whatever, right? Because, you know, he knew that he couldn't give all of himself to one person, and vice versa. But I didn't want to miss out on what a great person he was because of this, and the idea behind it, you know, always intrigued me and always made me feel like, you know, this is something that could be really truly wonderful. But, you know, there's just the demons that you have to get past, the jealousy and the ego and stuff like that in order to really truly participate.
She found terminology for it, which explained a good portion of what I wanted.
I did some research, and I ended up typing in like Google multiple loving relationships, and polyamory came out, and I presented him with this information, and it was pretty cool to watch him, like, just the way that he was so overjoyed that he found like a community that he could relate to, and how the material described exactly how he felt, and just things that he'd been trying to tell people over the years but didn't quite know how to label it. And it was at that moment that I knew that it was for sure, like, this is actually who he was, and not just like playing pretend or whatever, right? Just so that he could sleep around with other people.
I find the biggest hurdle for a lot of people is labeling. They think, you know, you got to be polyamorous, or you're a swinger, or consensual non, whatever. They get wrapped up in the terminology. So when they read what that is, then they label themselves that way, and then they feel like they have to act within the boundaries of that definition. And it's really not about that. It's about finding what works for you. And that doesn't happen overnight.
If your partner needs to get permission from you first, you are exerting control. And that's a big thing for me as well about being poly, is not controlling other people and not being controlled by other people. I don't know, at what point I would have time to date again, but I don't see myself ever wanting to be monogamous.
A lot of the fear around it is a jealousy-based situation, a fear of losing somebody. I'm definitely a little bit different that way.
I get really jealous, which I feel bad about usually, because it has most often been the case that I am the person who is in other relationships, and my partners are mostly only with me, or seriously dating me and just kind of seeing someone else.
I do fear other people getting into the lifestyle as a solution to fix problems in the relationship. It's definitely not the way you want to go about it.
Yeah, there's a couple of fears that I have in this lifestyle. Number one would be, I know that Alistair likes to expand his relationships with women, and sometimes these women have boyfriends or husbands that don't always 100% know what's going on. And then I do fear that, you know, a text message may be seen or misinterpreted by the husband, and, you know, people get angry and people get jealous and they do irrational things when that happens, and, you know, somebody could show up at our door very unhappy with him, and how can you explain to that person, you know, what we're about and why it's okay to them it's not, and that can cause a lot of stress and problems in our life that I'd rather not deal with.
I ask my partners to be as open and honest and upfront with me as they can.
Another fear that I have is maybe Alistair gets into a second relationship with another woman, and she can't handle his predominant relationship with myself, and, you know, she makes a big scene or, you know, trouble in our life and stuff like that. Although I do have the faith in Alistair that he would shut like something like that down. I think sometimes when I have too much alcohol, I try to fight. I have these like demons or whatever that are like hidden behind me, where like I try to like make Allie be the Disney princess hero that, you know, we all grew up with, you know, like if some guy, you know, offered me a monogamous life, would you fight for me, and all this kind of stuff. And he doesn't play into my antics because it's not something he believes in. He just thinks it's ridiculous, and he thinks I'm being ridiculous when I do it. And he just tells me, baby, if you found somebody that made you more happy than me, he's like, I would be sad, but I would be happy for you, and I would want you to have the best life that you want to have. And statements like that just make everything melt away, and it's like, how could you give something like that up?
I don't think that there's anything you can say to somebody at that point. I mean, realistically, there's so much growing and learning you do along the way. There's not any one thing that you could say to somebody that would change their mind or open their eyes or do anything.
Having feelings for more than one person is not wrong, and it's not bad, and it is something to explore, and there are other people like you.
You can't take it lightly. You have to be open to pushing yourself. You have to be open to pushing your partner's boundaries a little bit.
I'm constantly reminding myself that my relationship is not affected by my partner's other relationships. My relationship with them is its own thing.
You know, it's like being a toddler all over again, and like, you know, they drop their cookie and it's the end of the world. And of course, to you as an adult, you're like, you know, it's not a really big deal. You can just pick up the cookie. Well, it's the same sort of like dealing with your jealousy and emotions as an adult. Yes, your partner may be going and enjoying a night with somebody else and having fun, but is it really worth being upset over? Is it worth, you know, is their night of release and happiness and something that they're enjoying? Should you cloud that with your own jealousy and insecurities and make them feel bad about it? Instead, wouldn't you want them to come home to somebody who asked you how it was and did you have fun, and pick that cookie up and eat it together?
There are as many ways to do poly as there are people who are poly.
Okay. Understand and grow with it. Otherwise, you're watching from a distance and you're just making opinions. You're not actually learning anything about it.